That's good.
Hello, and welcome to this video. And I am so happy to have these two guys here on my channel. Um, in the well, I think it's the top left to me. I hope it is for you at home. We have Mr. James Morgan, guitar aficionado, and of course, we also have somebody I've wanted on my channel for absolutely years because he's one of my favorite musicians. Not only one of my favorite drummers, but also I believe one of the great improvising keyboardists on the planet at the moment, Mr. Gary Husband.
Yeah.
Come on, we'll give him
Oh,
a round of
wow.
applause. Not worthy, not
Wow.
worthy. So I
Thank
think
you,
I
Andy.
think
Thank you, man. Thank you.
I first saw you on Alan's Secrets tour, which was like '89, something like that, in London.
Oh, my goodness.
That's how long we're going back. It's like 35 years was the first time I saw you. It blew me away, because I was always trying to find somebody that was playing like they meant it. And in the '80s, there was a lot of fusion that sounded pretty, good players, but pretty lame, and I was searching for those guys that were going to try and get a bit of blood on the stage, as John McLaughlin always says, and I think you had Fred Baker. Let's give out shout out for Fred Baker, my
Oh,
old
oh,
mate up in Birmingham. He
wow.
was opening up for you on solo bass.
Oh, yeah.
I'm very pleased to have Gary. Now, James got in touch with me because he has a trio, an incredible trio. He sent me the album over. I've done a review of it, so some of you might have seen that. But I was really impressed because it had some heart and it had some soul, and it took me on a journey and it gave me a few punches in the face. And I was very pleased to hear that. It sounded like they meant it. They weren't worried about the wrong notes and they weren't worried about going down a place that they didn't know where they were. So I was very excited to hear that. But of course, James, you put this incredible band together, haven't you? So, do you want to give us a little background about your album, who's on it, and how that came to be?
Well, I'll tell you the credit goes to Dean Brown, who legendary guitarist, as you know, played with Billy Cobham and Gary and many others. In fact, he was very popular in South Korea. I didn't know. I talked to his mother actually just yesterday, and we were talking because he had passed away a few months ago, and she was telling me some great stories about him. But yeah, so after we finished my last album that he produced, Groove and Smooth on Guitar One Records, he a couple of months after it came out in March of 2023, we had been texting back and forth, watching tennis. We're both tennis buffs. So at one point, he was asking me about some songs that he had heard me play while they were editing the last album. And I told him there were some fusion things that I had worked on, and he told me to send him the songs. So I did. And he picked some songs and he said, I really like these 5 songs. I think they're really, well, he liked 8 of them, but we ended up doing 5. But he said they sounded beautiful. They had, he could really work with them. And it reminded him of that little clip of 70 to 75, kind of Mahavishnu-ish, Jean-Luc Ponty kind of thing. And I had sent him some videos of me soloing and stuff because he hadn't heard me. He only heard me playing the jazz. And he said, yeah, we should do an album together if you want to do a solo album. And I said, yeah. I said, if you want to produce it. And he said, yes. And then he's the one who got Gary on board and Hadrian. And
So just let them know who you've got on bass, because it's one of the greatest bass
well, we
players
have
around
Hadrian
the
Farad
band.
on bass, who he's played with. And I think Hadrian attributes a lot of his being introduced to music in the US through Dean, because he played a lot with him, and they were close, very close. And then of course you already know the background with Gary, but anyway, he contacted them and said, do you want to be in this album? I don't know exactly what the conversation was, but obviously I was in obscurity, up till about 2020 when my first album came out. So I don't have that background where they go, oh yeah, James Morgan, yeah, let's do an album with him. So I'm sure there was some credibility that Dean had to relay to them about somebody they had never heard of. So yeah, the album came about, and Dean went ahead and charted the album, and he was really happy with the fact that he only had to do charts for Gary, because Hadrian and I don't read music; we play by ear.
Well,
And,
Hadrian as well. God, how do you get like
yes.
that?
I know a lot of people always say that when I tell them, and yeah, I mean, if you ever notice, he never has a tablet in front of him when he's playing live or music. He just has an ear that is a natural ear, and he hears every component of a drum set if you listen to his playing and the song, and he gets it, you know, he really does. So anyway, Dean got them on board, and we had a certain process which Dean would do, like a script for a movie. He'd put a mock-up with electronic bass and drums and all that. And he would make recordings. And so it's like a script he could send to everyone. Okay, here's the script, now learn your part. And so he sent it to Gary. Gary went ahead and did his drums, and then that was sent back. We mixed those. And that was in September. And Gary did it all in one day, which he'll tell you about that. But after that, that's when Dean started getting sick, and eventually passed away into 2024. And anyway, so we sent the drums to Hadrian. Hadrian did his bass part, and then we mixed that, sent it back to Gary. Gary had a lot more time to do his keyboards. And then they sent it to me to do my guitar parts, which I did in like 3 hours. So because I had to rent a studio, I don't have a home studio. So I didn't really have time to do a lot. I just had time to go in there and go on fire and do what I could. But yeah, and then Gary took over the reins from there, because, you know, he's got a lot more experience than I do. And the engineer, you know, he was really concerned that I was working with, that recorded my guitar parts, that he wouldn't be up to snuff. So Gary was gracious enough to take over the rest of the album and spent hours, you know, meticulous hours, not just about doing his keyboard parts, but doing the editing and mastering and making sure it all came about. And that's kind of what happened. And
so did you mix and master the album, Gary, as well?
No, I just got great people to do it.
Oh, that's good. I was starting to get worried that you could also mix at that level, because it's a beautiful sound album.
No. I wouldn't assume to impose that on anybody.
Yeah.
Mixing. I mean, drums are so loud, you know. Anyway,
Oh,
no,
yeah, I'm the same.
you don't want to hear. But you know, really, basically, I thought you know, I had in mind a couple of people, both who are sort of very regular to people, to me, and to people that I've worked with too. So really, it made sense to go somewhere like East Coast Studio, where they've got this old MCI board there. And it's, I mean, it looks terrible now, but it's actually maintained still beautifully after all these years. And you just run anything through that, and it just sounds amazing.
People forget all this.
So we really benefit from the analog impact, you know, in the music. You feel the force, you feel the energy, and you feel the air, and you feel the warmth and the hugeness of everything. So I mean, I'm a total convert to working that way. So I mean, it made sense. And to you as a great mastering engineer, Andrew Tulloch, you know, he's the best.
And the thing is, when I first heard it, I thought, well, they've all recorded this in the same room. And I think because you work quite quickly, it does sound like you're all playing together. When I found out it had been done separate, I was quite shocked, because it really sounds like you're going for it. But I think that process of going around the circle and then getting Gary to do the drums and then going around the circle again. I know
Right.
John McLaughlin did the same with that Liberation Time album, didn't he? Where he
Yeah. Actually, I've done a lot of both instruments on many albums for many different people, but really, come the time of Liberation Time, I think it highlights the benefit really of a team of people that are experienced playing together. so that you have this, you just have this sort of second nature sense of what they're going to do and when they're going to do it somehow, and you develop that. And when, you know, the other side of it is if the drums actually get done first, well, that's a great help to everybody. I mean, it's tougher on the drummer because we don't really know what we're coming off. But if the drummer has the benefit of a blueprint of a plan for each tune, very basically, for example, solo length and how many times it goes through a particular sequence or whatever, the drums can feel what kind of might take place. A lot of that is based on the brief too, because I got a quite a detailed brief from Dean in the beginning when I first started working on them. So I could tell that, I mean, I had a lot of insight into the kind of spirit he wanted, which was fine. I mean, it was just great for me just to go for it and to make it, give it some energy. But the advantage really was once the drums are down. I mean, it's like in so many ways, as you know, Andy, the drummer's kind of like the band leader. It's like when he decides to hot things up a bit, things start moving. And that can occur at different moments. So I try to just really assume myself, as I always do, in a band. And I'm not just playing the demos, I'm also hearing a kind of what could be, in the time allotted to do it. And it's like I could really hear the guitar, right, starting to dig in around now, and you go for it and you play as if the guitar is doing that. And that in turn sort of passes over to the other musician, the bass, whoever comes next, the bass starts playing in a way that's automatically, whoa, he's digging in a bit, I better, step on the gas a bit myself and do it. And indeed the soloist, because it's all about inspiring the soloist, isn't it? When in actual fact, when you're playing together, it's a unit. But as John McLaughlin says so many times, once you put the headphones on, you're in the band.
You're in the band, yeah.
It doesn't matter. You can kind of
You've
feel and
you've
anticipate what's going to happen.
you've fired my brain up with talking about the spirit and knowing other players and having a relationship with people. Because just before we started, we were talking about the issues with sort of Instagram jazz and YouTube jazz and watching players and you just watching it for that 30 seconds of virtuosity. And we were saying how you miss a little bit that feeling of Elvin and John Coltrane or Tony and Miles Davis. This is more than just technique. Now, I'm sorry about this, James, but I am going to have to get into this with Gary because I think Gary performed a very important role in music in that he tied up what Allan Holdsworth was trying to do when how old were you when you joined Alan's band, when you started playing with him?
Well, firstly, he was doing it. He wasn't trying to do anything.
Yeah, but my point is
He was
that
ready.
yeah, but when he brought his compositions in, and then you got involved, because I'm such a massive Allan Holdsworth fan. He's
Yeah.
doing all this other stuff. Alan's ready, but his compositions, you brought those out, and the way you related with Alan was a huge influence on me. I think it's a huge influence on everybody. There's a certain way of playing now with a guitarist. You can hear Cobham with John McLaughlin. You can hear there's a whole bunch of them. You can hear Vinny with Frank Zappa on Shut Up and Play Guitar. These are all these approaches. But for me, what you were doing on those on Alan's albums, and I would love to know how you did that. Was it because you were young and you didn't think about it? Because it's an incredible achievement. Those early, I mean, all the way through, but those early albums, what you're doing with Alan's it's like a
Well,
new thing.
I thought it had its own thing because the personality sounded really different. He sounded completely original anyway. Let's face it, anybody who knows him,
Mm,
as we all know him,
yeah.
very different kind of guitar player. And it all was working in a much different different way, you know, but it gave drums the chance to assume sort of different routes, really, of sort of navigating it, if you like. Again, we're talking about this drum, you know, leaning towards being more of a protagonist for things to happen. Um, you know, this is really a good example of how you know, to say that someone like Alan was not a natural band leader. He was a very reluctant band leader.
Mm.
He'd rather just, and it's actually his persona on stage would reveal that. He'd be standing in front of his amps and just like a side man, basically. There was nothing to suggest that he was the man of the concert or the artist of the and his band.
He
It
was
was
the opposite of Dean Brown.
it kind of like the total opposite antithesis of Dean Brown. Yeah. Yeah.
In fact, real quick, Dean's mom told me that he was playing with Boss Skaggs, and Boss Skaggs fired him. And he fired him not because he wasn't doing his job, because he was stealing the show
Stealing the show, yeah.
because of his personality and how he played on stage. So he got rid of him, and he said, "Fine, I'll get a job somewhere else."
Yeah. And he did.
Yeah.
Well, I think I told you over the phone my Dean Brown story when I was playing back with Robert Plant, and we'd had a big series of adventures, and we ended up in Switzerland. We did this massive gig in Naples. We had to get a police escort out. It was full on rock and roll thing, and we arrived in Switzerland. Hadn't got a clue what was going on, and I found out we were playing with Billy Cobham, my absolute idol, on the drums, you know, and. I went off to get fondues with Robert, and I kept saying, "Robert, we've got to go and see Billy Cobham. He's playing. He's my hero." And I dragged Robert to go and see this gig, and he really enjoyed it. It was like a big band, and it was Dean on guitar, and Dean stole the show. He stole the show, and it wasn't just his playing; it was just the writhing, animating the music. The music was coming out of him, and you know, and I think that's partly because Robert's a very much. He recognizes like the Stance because he's an Elvis Presley fan, Little Richard, and he wants to see that. You know, he's not so much into you know this. And he came out and said that's really good. He said there was this power there, the big band, and then that guy on guitar. God, that was you know. So it was a lovely moment to be in that. You know, and I think he went on the radio a few days later and mentioned it on the radio. He said my drummers dragged me off to see a jazz gig, and it was like this. So I really did enjoy it. You know. So.
Well, you know, I wanted to
Nice story.
refer to what Gary was saying about him anticipating and imagining what the other musicians would be doing in this context of a song. And I think we wanted to achieve that feeling like we were in the same room. And I think it comes from not just listening, but the experience of improvising. And since I don't read music, I've trained myself that I can go in any situation and I can play as if I had rehearsed with them because my ear is so quick. In fact, the guitar solo on the first song was the first take.
Yeah.
I did other takes. So when you have that experience and you're able to just hear what's supposed to happen, and I think his keyboard background, playing piano, was probably an advantage too, because it gives him a even more of an understanding of what the music is.
Well, you wanted pushing as well. I remember email exchanges with you.
Yes.
And you were suggesting, listen, just push me out, you know, do unexpected you know, extensions on things and you know, take harmonic liberties and stuff. And oh, okay, you know, so I did. As if I was playing behind you, but all of us, you're in the guise of a character all the time. You're the guy sitting at the thing and trying to find great stabs to put behind people and try and place them in a great place, you know, behind people and anticipate all that with some solo, you know, some hot solo going on. So I do that, and I remember you encouraging me to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you listen to the solo, actually, when you'll hit a chord on the keyboard, I hit a note at the exact same time because I'm playing off it, but I'm mostly playing off rhythm. And your drums really set the voice for every song in my mind. And the rest was just dressing. and the way you interpreted each part. And the thing I liked about all the songs and everything you didn't just, you're not a session musician, you're Gary Husband. So you took each bar, and I challenge anybody to find one bar that you actually repeated yourself, and you created a story for every bar. And as a guitar player, and what Dean had told me, he said, James, practice with the songs and get to know them like you're in the room with them. But when you go in the studio, I want you to not play anything that you played before you walked in there. Just leave it out and just play as if you're hearing it for the first time. And I did that, and to his direction, because it's going to be more from the heart, more to the story that's I'm hearing at that time, where I am at on that day. It's just like if you're a tennis player, you can be a great tennis player and you can have some great matches, but you don't know how you're going to feel the next day, if you're going to be tired or fatigued, or you have a headache, or you just broke up with your girlfriend or whatever. You got to go at that time you allotted yourself, and you got to separate yourself from everything and just be in that moment and do it. And that's what I did. Yeah. And I think we all did that. And that's why the album sounds like we're all in the same room, because it was like the perfect storm. And I think Dean knew all three of us. That's why he picked you two to be on there, because he knew me, he knew my playing and how I think as a player. And it just came together. And it's almost, if you liken it to walking downstairs. If you walk down a set of stairs, you could just walk down, not even think about it. But if you think about walking down the stairs, you can kind of trip. And it's because you're in your head. Yes. So when I play guitar, anytime I play, I always try to, like, I'm not present in myself thinking about it. I'm just reacting to the story so I can be a part of that story. And then
but it's like that Vinny, he needs to copyright that quote, Vinny, which is thought is the enemy of flow, isn't it? And so you do all this preparation and practice, and then when you get in there, you have to sort of then try and switch that off and exist in the eternal now. That's the way I see it. But what's interesting listening to you is you asking Gary to push you, and then Gary going, right, so I will push you rhythmically and harmonically. And that area, it's so weird that musicians can understand that in two different continents and put something together where we understand what we're talking about. Now, when you were talking about this, it reminds me of a story of do you know the Jack Johnette's Elvin Jones story? Have you ever heard this? Where before Jack was well known, he was playing in a small club and Coltrane was playing. And when they got there, Elvin wasn't there. And they didn't know what to do. So the club owner says, Jack's pretty good on the drums. That's an understatement. Jack's pretty good on the drums. So he gets up to play with John Coltrane. And the interview said, what's it like? And he said it was like an infinite well of energy. And it was kind. Everything I gave him, he took, but he wanted more. There was more. So we would give him more, and he wanted more. And he said Coltrane was literally pulling like a black hole of energy out of Jack to Johnette, and every time he gave more, he went, "That's lovely, I love it. More, please." And we all know, we all have a feeling when we hear that story. You go, "Oh my, can you imagine that? To have Coltrane pulling as a drummer, to have Coltrane pulling that out of you, you would be able to find things that." And it's weird because we all take our ego takes, "Oh, this is me playing," but it's not. It's the musicians around you enable you, don't they? And I think that's a wonderful thing that you said, push me, Gary, I need you to push me. And it's not to fight, it's to actually find,
to provoke
yeah,
in a healthy sense, to push it.
I think this is why I asked about Allan. You sort of been 19, 20 years old and hooking up with Allan Holdsworth. I wondered, was that the situation that you start playing with? You've had all this prep, you've listened to all these players, and then suddenly you're in that situation. Was he like that to play with? I imagine he must have had it, because he always sounds very connected to the infinite to me, is the only way I can describe it.
Yeah, he would. I mean, he
In a Yorkshire way, in a
yeah,
down-to-earth Yorkshire way, he was definitely connected to the infinite.
but I mean, he didn't like anything turning static. He didn't want to hear one bar. It's funny you coined this earlier, James.
That's what made me think it. You see, this is the
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that phrase was very
It's
good.
all connected. But Alice just don't. I don't want to hear a repeat of a beat. The bar after. I just want to hear differences. I want to hear invention, constant invention all the time, and that's the way I kind of, whatever he said, the meaning of, that's how he gets his thrills. You know, you got to just what he wanted, Andy, was to be taken on a ride, and in the more unexpected ways that could materialize, the happier he was.
And he required that,
So
even though he was Allan Holdsworth, he
yeah, he
required
did.
that to
Oh,
be Allan Holdsworth.
oh, most definitely, yeah. He just hated sort of static. Oh, I keep saying static, but repetitive,
Mundane, boring.
kind of mundane, boring, but not really bringing any creative sparkle to anything. Everything. And also he wanted it loud, as I had to remind him later in life when he used to complain.
I can say I saw you in I think 1990, and it seemed pretty loud to me. It was like whoa, but a lot of that was the energy more. I was winding you up a little bit, Gary. It was the energy, with the
The energy.
force coming off that stage.
Well,
Absolutely. I mean, the most. I got to say this. I know I'm a fanboy. I've said it on the YouTube. The most incredible gig I've ever seen was Allan Holdsworth with Gary at Ronnie Scott's in Birmingham.
oh my
Right,
God.
and it was unbelievable. You came back out stage, the encore, did a long improvisation. My friend, who was a guitarist, had gone to watch it, and when it finished, we were like walking around, and where's my mate Paul? And he was literally stood like this. Of course, we went up to Alan at the bar and said it was amazing, and he was going, "I'm sorry I had to put you through that," and all it was, and all this stuff. But honestly, Gary, it was unbelievable. So it's very hard to have this conversation and talk without, because this is my life. I've seen it.
Sure.
I've seen everybody. I've seen Miles Davis, but that was the one. It was
Wow.
unbelievable. It's probably
Wow.
another night for you, another night. But it was like,
Wow.
it was incredible. The energy.
I
It was
wanted
just
to I wanted to speak a little bit to what Gary just said, because I'm old and I forget things. But when I talked to Gary, I told him, I said, we're trying to the album, first of all, was like a celebration really of that period. And there's the
without a doubt. Yeah, without a doubt. That's what I felt. Yeah.
And I had told Gary, I go, do what they did in those days. Just if you want to extend something longer, do it. If you want to use whatever sounds you want, do whatever you want. Just this is not set. So much music today, and I've talked about this before with Gary, is that a lot of these drummers, like even like Protocol, I think the name of the band is, a lot of it's groove oriented. There's not a lot of changes. And I've always loved changes because it creates tension. You have the release, you have dynamics, you can relax. But with a lot of the music nowadays, it's just soloing over a groove, and there's no real changes. And they might do some quick, staccato-y type scalier changes, which is great, shows their gymnastics. But this album was really about celebrating that time and being creative and pushing the boundaries. And I did tell Gary that. And then what it does, because I get, like, if you listen to my songs, there's a lot of time changes. One of them has 5 different time signatures, because I get bored. When I write songs, I write out of boredom, because I can't do one thing for very long, because then that's why, this contemporary jazz that I created the band, a Ghost Jazz Trio, to do, just to make money as another income stream, is really hard for me to play. It's harder than fusion, jazz, rock, because I have to play within a confines of a certain form and a groove and the change, and here it comes. But with jazz rock, it's not about that. You could go every night and play the same song different every night. You know where the melody is. Sure, you're going to do that. But when it comes, if someone's having a magic moment and they're going somewhere, you just throw down whatever you thought you were going to do and you follow them, and it'll take you right to where you're supposed to go. And then depending on the experience of the musicians and how they can play, it'll naturally go right back into where it's supposed to.
Yeah.
Well,
And
well,
that's,
listen,
to me, that's what playing with other,
moving on to
that's what playing
influences,
with other
James.
musicians, it's exciting to play live for me. And
Mhm.
this album to me was like playing live.
Mhm.
You know?
Listen to your guitar playing, James. It's obviously, and I think this is why you probably approached me, because you know I love this. But you sound like the more, you know, I could hear obviously John McLaughlin in there. I could hear Bill Connors in there. I could hear John Abercrombie in there. Those early '70s guitar players that were just sort of, you knew they got the chops, but they were playing by the seat of their pants, and that's what I felt. Your playing is like. So what were your influences, you know, as a guitar player?
Well, when I first, when I was younger, I was introduced to him to the Seventh Galaxy by my older brother. He brought that over to the house.
Wow, yeah.
And when I heard that, I had been playing acoustic guitar, you know, as a teen, but didn't really have a direction. When I heard Bill Connors, I wanted to play that music and that in that album. So that's where it started. And then, like you mentioned, John Abercrombie on Crosswinds album, that was a huge influence. Total Eclipse was a huge influence album for me. I know a lot of people talk about Red Baron and all these Spectrum album, but I really liked those other ones. You know, those influenced me. And then yeah, and listen, John Abercrombie was great. And of course, when Lenny White came out with the Venetian Summer album, and I heard Ray Gomez on Mating Drive. I mean, I listened to that.
Hello, Ray.
Yes.
He'll be watching this. He won't.
Oh,
I'm trying to get him on here. But
to me, that's what like Dean had that voice, you know, and that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to just, because when you go to a concert or you go to a show, or if you're recording, you know, I want to be inspired, you know, and the only way you can inspire others is to just go for it. And then they can hear it's like if you're in a relationship and you spill your heart out to your love, because you want them to know how much you care about them. And you just go for it, and they can either throw it back at you or they can accept it, and then it happens. And that's for me, that's what music is. It's just, you know, why spend all those hours of practicing and all of the time you put in, first of all, to play other people's music, which I've never done really. I've always stuck to my own, and just create something new. And I think, again, the album, which is called A Soul in Time, co-produced with Dean Brown, that this album was to embody that. And my Bitches Brew was another key album. Bitches Brew, I think I wore that album out, because if you think about it, all the players on that album went out and did their own things. I mean, and the fusion came out of that, really, all those players. And so I always felt I was part of that lineage. Like I was going to stay pure to the jazz rock, and that's all I played from then on. I never changed until 2017. I started doing this other thing again, because you couldn't make money playing that. But yeah, those were my influences, and then taking lessons from Bill Connors, how his philosophy about approaching the guitar, and you know, he would always impress upon me, it's about technique, but it's more about telling a story. And then to meet Dean Brown, who confirmed all that, he was all about telling a story. And he knew how to, as a producer, and he knew how to bring that out in you. He knew how to, because he would call you on your stuff. You know, he had that New York kind of shoot from the hip thing. He'd go, no, he goes, it's nice, but it's boring. He goes, you're playing it safe. Don't take me on a milk run. He goes, I want you to go somewhere you never go in that dark room with the lights off. And you may hear some weird sounds in there, but just go for it. And then I would do stuff that I'd say, oh, I can redo that part because I thought I hit the string with my thumb or whatever. He goes, no, I love that part because it was real. And I think when people listen to this album, A Soul in Time, which you can get at Bandcamp, by the way, everybody plays like that on this album. It wasn't like, oh, okay, I'm doing an album, going to record the songs, because not only because of the music, the songs kind of drew it out of you, but because Dean had wanted this, we wanted to fulfill his vision of what this album would be.
Absolutely.
And that's a lot to live up to, but I think we did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Gary, what about you? What are your keyboard influences? Because the thing I really love about your keyboard playing is the note selection and the phrasing. Of course, it's because you're a drummer, and we have a much more elevated sense of rhythm and phrasing. Of course, we do. You know, all the great keyboardists are drummers. That's why I do everything. Zawinul, Chick Corea, Jan Hammer. They're all great drummers. But no, I'm being a bit in the drummers club. But
Did George Duke play drums?
I'm sorry?
George Duke, did he
Of course
play
he
drums?
did. We did.
I'm sure he did. Yeah.
We don't need to have my theory proved wrong with facts. But Gary, who are your keyboard influences?
Funnily enough, not outside of Jan Hammer, really. I mean, harmonically and what he does as a soloist and what he was doing throughout the 70s. And, you know, even after Mahavishnu and stuff, you know, with his own, with these long forgotten albums people never talk about.
My favorite albums, oh yeah, Melodies, you know, those albums. Oh, you know, all of them, like Children, the Genesis one for 7 days.
And you think that he would be of prime influence, you know, interest to talk to. I mean, this guy, you know, if you listen to Black Sheep and the successor to that, I can't remember what it's called.
Hammer.
He's actually, yeah.
I'm a massive Jan Hammer fan. It's like, I mean, he's proper Jan Hammer fan.
Oh, me too. Me too. But you know, I mean, he was he actually went in so deep that he was impersonating like plectrum noises and hearing the delay of the accidents with the plectrum and stuff like that. And stuff like that was happening in his keyboard play. That's how deep it was. I mean,
I've called him on my channel. I've called him the Charlie Parker of jazz rock, because there's all these incredible bebop players, but Charlie Parker comes in and he goes, "This is the phrasing, this is the sound, this is the notes." And if anybody embodies what is special about jazz rock as opposed to jazz, you know, hard bop, it's Jan Hammer. It's his way of phrasing and his note selection. And you know how you'll play like a major third over a minor. You'll like play Mixolydian over virtually everything. You know that sound, that Jan Hammer sound. I almost feel like that's the sound of fusion. There's an openness harmonically, but his phrasing is impeccable, isn't it?
Oh, it's just wonderful. Yeah, so special, so special.
And it's funny because he's obviously gone on to superstardom success doing the Miami Vice stuff, and he's you know, played with all these Jeff Beck, and he's played with all these monsters, but the actual fusion stuff that he did after Mahavishnu seems to have got forgotten. And for me, it's equal. Oh yeah, Magical Dog. That keyboard playing on there is just, I always say, it's just unbelievable. So did any other soloists though? Because hearing your keyboard playing is very saxophone-esque, you know, it's very...
It's funny you should say that, because Wayne Shorter, Albert Ayler. Oh yeah, man. You know, and a lot of the free jazz, I know it sounds sort of off the wall, but you know, when I was growing up and stuff, I used to go down to a lot of the free jazz clubs, go down from Yorkshire actually, to even before I lived in London, to see, do you remember a place called The Plough in Stockwell? No, nobody remembers.
No, I was too young and too far away.
It was big. There was a big kind of free fraternity there, And I used to see Louis Maholo. You ever hear of him?
Yeah, African
And a
music.
lot
Yeah.
of his African friends, and he was on fire. I mean, drummers that were on fire really just got me. Basically, just to hear a drummer testifying would be like everything for me. In fact, my original influence, John Von Ohlen with Stan Kenton Orchestra, 1972. That's the reason I play drums. That guy.
Well, Stan Kenton is another guy that has had such a huge influence on jazz all the way through. How many musicians came out of his thing? How many,
Yeah.
and there's that sort of progressive third stream approach right in the early 40s that lays the ground for a whole bunch of players, like Don Ellis and all those types of people that then come
Yeah,
in.
sure.
And the other thing is, it's interesting there is I always felt that the free jazz, I love free jazz. I've listened to loads of it. I feel it partially developed the language of jazz rock. You couldn't have had jazz rock without free jazz. And a
No.
lot of the post beboppers, they couldn't work it out because how do you play, over a groove, and you can play modally, but you can also get into the sounds and noises. And I love Albert Island. His fire, and also it's like Coltrane, isn't it? There's so much going on.
Yeah, Spiritual Unity with
Yeah,
what's his name?
Sonny Murray.
Sonny Murray. Ah, man.
But
I used to have these. Everybody else had Bay City Rollers pictures on their desk. Bowie. Actually, I love Bowie, but Bay City Rollers and Elvis sometimes. That was okay. Kind of approved of that, but Bay City Rollers, are you out of your anyway? That was another thing. But I thought that really the only hip teacher in one of the schools that I attended, because a few of them got rid of me. Best not say any more on that. But I had a picture of Billy Cobham back in the day, of course, with his beard and the aviator
big
glasses,
aviators, yeah.
looking really, really cool and pretty intense, And I had this picture on my desk, and the art teacher, who was basically the only one I thought that was hip out of any of them, came up and said, "I know who that is." Really? You do? He said, "Yep." That's great. That's unbelievable. Never thought I'd be in a school and have one day when one of the teachers would come and say, "I know who that is." And he said, yeah. Curtis Mayfield's a big favorite of mine. Up until that day,
I was really moved by that little story. That I was there thinking, it's those those special teachers. Just one comment like that can inspire you for a whole life. Oh my God.
That's right. It's the way he said it was so earnestly. I know who that is, and I believed him. I fell in hook, line, and sinker. Yes.
That has made me laugh. It's right though. He does have a look of Curtis Mayfield, doesn't he? Billy in the classic period, Total Eclipse era. Yeah. But the free jazz thing. What would you say to? Because there'll be people watching this and they love the jazz rock and they love all the stuff he did, but I know they have problem with the free jazz, and I initially did. But the thing is, I loved Coltrane, so I loved My Favorite Things and all those albums. Live at Birdland was my first Coltrane album. I loved it, and then I went and got Meditations, and it was a bit like, what is this? And so I got my head into it, and I realized that there was an energy source there that was the same as all the stuff I liked, but it was in a way even more rhythmically advancing, that you had to almost let go of the time and surf on the top of this sound that was hard for me. But who would you say to go and listen to, Gary, in terms of free jazz?
Oh, well, I don't really know anymore. I mean, I can name a lot of records from the past, but
name a few, because I love it. You see, this is what I find fascinating, is what makes musicians who they are, and the free jazz thing with you is very interesting.
But one of the things that's an interesting kind of tie here is that if you listen to Bill Connors on the Stanley Clarke album, right, James?
Oh yeah.
And what's that riff? Do do da boy da do do. And by the end of
Yeah.
it, Tony is slamming.
Yeah.
He's incendiary by this
Yeah.
point. And he's doing these ridiculous roles and stuff. Bill Connors starts to get really free. I mean, he's really out of any kind of mode, scale, whatever you want to talk about. He's really just taking it out, and he's flying. I mean, it's like the real call, and he's there, and it's on that record. And I responded to your history with Bill James, because I thought that I picked up on a little bit of a Connors-esque thing some from
Oh,
time.
without a doubt, yeah.
Yeah. And I said, hey, Bill Connors, is he in there? Is he in you, kind of? And then
Well,
you told me stories.
another guitarist that I ran into, I was living in Lahaina or Maui in the early 90s, and I was managing a restaurant. I was young, in my 20s, and Danny Gottlieb and Mark Egan had come to Maui, just the two of them. And Mark Egan would play on a delay his bass, set it up, and then he'd solo over it. And Danny Gottlieb on drums. That was it. That was their band. So he forgot his delay. I happen to have one. It was a Digitech that had the same amount, the exact one. Go figure. So I went home, got it, gave it to him to use. So I ended up hanging out with Danny Gottlieb and talking and stuff. Told him I was a guitar player. And he told me, he says, well, you can go two paths. You can go the Joe Satriani path, where you just get really super good and you're a band leader, or you can learn how to read music and be a side musician, and then eventually make a name for yourself and do it that way. Well, obviously I chose just to be a band leader out of default, because that's not reading. That's what I had to do. And I always had keyboardists that could read, and they'd relay everything to everybody else. And it just became a thing. But what I did is I recorded a tape that was a reel-to-reel tape in those days at George Benson's studio in Lahaina. And I took that tape and went to Los Angeles, and I was going to shop it. And while I was living there, I ended up, I thought I would take lessons. Why not again? So I ended up running into Jorge Struns of Caldera, the guitarist with Caldera. I don't know if you remember that band. He Struns and Farah, you probably remember. So I ended up going over to his house to take lessons, and we ended up just jamming. And I never took a lesson, but I recorded it on cassette players. You had a little cassette back then. And then he also gave me advice of how to play. And it all seemed to be what Connors had told me back in the day was, just reach for things that aren't there. We're artists,
Yeah.
You got to reach for, we're not mathematicians. And then guitar is different than any other instrument, because like on a keyboard, you have to sit a certain way, you play, you learn certain techniques to play. But guitar, everyone plays it different. They play with their teeth. They play different strings, they size guitars, whatever. So you have this instrument, and you have to just go for it, because if you don't, and Dean also kind of was the nail on the head, like, solidified all those things that Danny Gottlieb, all those people had told me along the way. He said this exact same thing, is if you don't go for it, then why are you kind of even doing it? Because we're here to, a lot of people think that the frontiers have already been covered, but music is intangible. It's a language that you can't see. And some of us are able to channel it. And if you have a voice and you have the technique to get it out there where people can understand it, enjoy it, and be inspired by it, that's what we're here to do. And I think, again, this album does that. And of course, all the music you guys are talking about does that too. But, that's really, to me, what's so exciting about this record,
Yeah.
But the other thing is that I think the calling, when you get called, as Gary so eloquently described it, that is a calling to you. So it's a personal thing. And so with musicians, some musicians like the Art Tatum and the Allan Holdsworth, they have to really, almost invent new techniques and push the instrument beyond to express themselves. But I hear the same thing in Freddie King and BB King. I hear the same thing in Little Richard when he sings. And it's all different for everybody. And so I think and I think a lot of the great jazz groups are often balanced by somebody who has that approach, like the John Coltrane, pushing the boulder up the mountain of attainment. But there's also the Ornette Coleman approach, and that's the two approaches, and it's embodied with Moz and Coltrane. There's always those, a lot of the great groups.
The quote that I think just embodies all of this. There was an Elvin Jones interview I either heard or read, and I don't know. It's just the perfect answer. And the guy said, how did you manage to, Coltrane would go on and on and on and on and on, and then it'd become drums and tenor for like an eternity, and then you would do like final slamming choruses, even heavier, and it was just roaring, by the end. How did you keep up? How did you sort of, what the question was like, how did you maintain what you did?
Maintain that energy, yeah.
Yeah. And he says, man, you play with a guy like that, you better be ready to die for the motherfucker. And man, there you go. But that shows you the extent of.
But when you watch that interview, you look at Elvin's eyes. He's not joking. That interview, he's not joking. He looks at the guy, and the guy's sort of nervous, and he laughs, and he looks like, "No, I mean it."
Yeah.
And I heard a story that Elvin, when he was near death, he was trying to work it so that he would be in a club playing because he wanted to die playing.
Yeah, I know.
So he meant it. He meant it. I mean, for me, Elvin's he's just one of the major guys for me. It's unbelievable otherness. I can't explain it, and that's what it is. I haven't got that. I'm not prepared to die for anybody.
I wanted to interject a little bit because you guys are talking about these great players that are great, and that's the thing about a lot of these players you see on the internet. Again, Matteo Mancuso and a lot of other names I couldn't even mention because there's so many, and their technique is flawless, and they play amazing, and they put out these videos, and they're playing, Holdsworth songs, and they have the Holdsworth sound and technique and all this stuff down. And again, all these musicians you talk about, you name these albums like Jan Hammer, this album and that. But these new players nowadays, you don't have any point of reference to apply them to. You can say, oh yeah, the YouTube guy. It's not like it, where you can go, yeah, Ray Gomez playing with Lenny White or whoever, John McLaughlin. I mean, with the Intermounting Flame album, Birds of Fire, you can say all those. And I remember learning the songs off the records because back then you had to. You didn't have charts and all that.
I'm gonna say this. Well, Gary said, I hope he backs me up. He better back me up on this one. But now, if you go on YouTube, you go on different sites. There's a whole industry of how to play like Allan Holdsworth. There's whole videos that go on for hours of how to do. What's that Messiaen mode he's doing? How did he? Oh, he did it like this, and he phrased it, and you have to put it. And I'm sat there watching it all, going. And I speak out too because Gary will know this, obviously way more better than me. But I would have thought that Allan would have hated this that's going on at the moment.
He used to, of course, call them clones. Said, what is the point in some guy turning up and playing some, and he sounds more like me than I do.
Right.
It's like, what?
Yeah.
And he was at once sort of moved by it. Not really moved by it in a positive sense at all. He just thought it was really sad that people would give over so much of their valuable time, and everybody's time in life is valuable. And he would actively say to people, why are you wasting your time doing that?
And I heard him in an interview say that actually. He said,
broke his heart, man.
Yeah. Like he would do stuff that he didn't really care for, and he never wanted to hear it again. And then somebody's doing it on there, and he's,
It's
oh my God, I
yeah,
hated that book or whatever. You know, it's
yeah,
funny because I got to open for Holdsworth short before he passed away. And again, quick story, my CD happened to be playing in the background on a phone call he was with the venue owner. He asked who the band was and asked if we would open for him, which he usually didn't. He just played himself. So I got to meet him on stage and talk, blah, blah, blah. But then a while later, I was at a music store. He was in the acoustic guitar room at the same time I was. And we were up on each side of a panel. And I was playing a guitar and he was playing the guitar. I didn't know he was in there. He didn't know I was in there. We started jamming with each other because he was just playing something. I started soloing. And then when we saw each other around the corner, he recognized me and it was kind of neat. But we had talked about, I had talked to him about how, you know, there's a lot of people out there that try to sound like him. And that,
yeah.
you know, that's a compliment to you. I said that people do that. And he said that's really rather annoying or something. He had a very flippant joking thing about it. Like he really didn't care, you know,
No, he
like
did.
you said, waste their time.
You're exactly, I mean, it's nail on the head, man, because he would absolutely hate the extent as to what it's got to now.
It's an industry, and there's gatekeepers in the industry. And they sit there going, "You didn't quite get it right. Alan would have been using that amp when he did that, blah blah blah." You know, and it's like, "Oh, you need to have that guitar to do this." And I'm playing with a guitarist called Roy Marchbank at the moment, and Roy Marchbank is like an Allan Holdsworth. He's an incredible technician, and
Very
the
good.
gatekeepers are like just shooting him down. Now, Roy is I'll say this, and he's my friend, but he's a very tortured guy because every time he picks that guitar up, he's trying to reinvent it every single time,
Good for
and
him.
and hugely influenced by Alan, but influencing that he wants to do what Alan did. But Roy is very tortured because every time he plays something that he feels is just cliched or something, it hurts him to do it. Very very similar personality, I think. But the gatekeepers are going, "Oh, is this guy trying to be like Alan Holdsworth? He's not," and he gets so much grief from these people that now think they own this legacy. I think it's so sad, really. So,
Well, yeah, that's the other side of the coin. It's like uh I mean, Alan too had a lot of influences, you know, and it's not. I don't think it's accurate to say, oh, this guy. Yes, it was a very, very unique language, but it was a language that he formed to express what he felt in music. Like that's what technique is, isn't it? To
but
express
I tell you why
feeling,
I'll stick my neck
feeling.
out, Gary, and I might be wrong, but I have listened to Alan. What I hear quite strongly is Keith Jarrett.
Mm-hmm. You hear Keith, you
Yeah,
hear Alan Copeland in a lot of his
yeah.
Copeland things. I mean, yeah, he had influences for sure. I know.
That the American quartet, that early 70s American quartet, where he plays more muscularly, and Jarrett will just fly through these scales that are like very pianistic. And I always felt that Alan was trying to get that sound on guitar. I can hear Michael Brecker in there as well. I can hear
Absolutely. They were
there
two.
obviously Coltrane as well.
Yeah. I mean, but the difference was, you know, the Alan was always this, it was this attitude about you take the spirit, you take the
Take the
essence
spirit, yeah. It's the
of what's
spirit, yeah.
happening, but you don't have to take the actual thing. And if he felt that he got to know something of somebody, he'd actively avoid playing it because because I know what it is, and I don't want to. It's why he was against transcriptions. He was against transcriptions of any kind because he said, why would I want to get other people's spontaneous invention in my muscle memory? Why would I want to do that? You know, that was an
It's
example of how
yeah.
great that person was
It,
improvising at the time, but to actually replicate, to actually sort of study it. I'm probably going against what you might feel, but it definitely influenced me. Not that I
I,
need. influencing
I
actually, but I avoided it.
I've learned fills, and I've learned some Steve Gadd beats. You know, I learned 50 Ways to Live Your Life. I did all that when I was a kid. I learned
Yeah,
some Tony Williams fills. Couldn't really do them; they're too hard. I did all that, you know, but I've never learnt a solo. I've never
no,
learned. Because I always wanted to sound like me, and the drummers like you that fired me up, Narada Michael Walden, Billy Cobham. It was more that when I heard them, I wanted to play.
mm,
And that was all it was, you know. I wanted to play, so it's like let me have a go, you know. And it's the same with Allan Holdsworth. He fires me up like, God, I'm going to play guitar, but there's not a chance. But he has Alan's influenced me loads as a player, but you'd never
yeah,
hear it. But it's
no,
more trying. I just want to be able to get to that place
wonderful.
of of feeling connected, like he sounds connected. You know, that's
Yeah, yeah, and
connected to the great reservoir.
that's right, that's right, and my influences are there too. And you know what? I'm happy. I'm a happy guy. I mean, they're all there. Narada, Billy, Tony, Eric Gravatt, Jack DeJohnette, Mitch Mitchell, Keith Moon. I
Keith
mean, talk
Moon.
about
Yeah, I'm
jumping off
appreciating him now. I'm older. I tell you, I
cliff
hated him when I
edge.
was young.
You jump off with an idea and you do it
Yeah,
with conviction. And whether
but
you,
Yeah, Michael Walden was amazing. I
oh
mean, when
man,
he was so
what a
young,
kid.
him and Ralph Armstrong on bass,
Yeah,
they were just a force to be reckoned with. I mean, to me, that when I first heard, I thought Cobham was incredible. I'd seen Mahavishnu probably a dozen times live, and to see him, it was like he was like a storm on stage. I mean, he was a storm on the albums too. And what an amazing drummer. I mean, he had his own style. He broke boundaries left and right. I mean, he didn't sound like anybody,
he's
you
my
know?
favourite drummer. Lead boots on wires. When I was about 13 years old, I heard that drum beat. You know and I was just, what is this? And I've loved him so much. And what's really weird is when I set my YouTube channel up, the amount of love I've sent out to Narada, and he's received it, and now he's my friend. You know, he sent me
yeah, yeah.
flowers on my birthday. He wrote me a poem yesterday. Narada Michael Walden wrote me a poem, and the reason is because he never talks about technique. He knows it all, but he never mentions it. And he's a force of nature, that guy. I really believe I've learned so much getting to know him, in that it's his personality. I mean, he's got all the chops. He can, you know, he played with Weather
Well, you
Report.
know,
He was amazing in Weather Report. He played, you know,
yeah,
everyone he played with. He played with Robert Fripp on
but
Exposure, and he's better than any of the other drummers that Fripp ever
yeah,
had.
I know, wonderful.
I did.
I,
Oh,
I
thank
remember
you, Narada.
one of the first interviews I ever saw with him, where he described the act of playing as crying out. Clue
Hmm,
is in the title.
yeah.
That's how he felt about it. And he would describe the act of playing drums as crying out. And I
Well,
thought it was beautiful. I mean,
I could relate to
gave
that.
me, you know,
I can relate to that statement because Dean and I had many conversations about, music,
yeah,
and I know more about his background because, he would tell me he would go with his mom who sang with the Tommy Dorsey band, and he'd fly with his mom and sister everywhere. And she was in show business. But I told him about my childhood. I had a very turbulent one. My mom raised 3 kids. We lived in our car. We were on welfare. We were poor, back in those days. So music for me, guitar was a sanctuary. It was
yeah,
a thing that I could create my own world for myself, how I wanted it to be, and I felt comfortable in it. And that's how I got into music, because I had asked Dean how he got into it. So when you said it was crying out, to me, that's what playing guitar is for me. It's always been that sanctuary, away from everything else, that I could go be in my own sanctuary. And if other people can come in there with me while I'm playing, they're sharing. And it's beautiful and it's calming, and I feel at home, and I'm
mm,
connected to everything when I'm playing. And I can understand that statement, because that's what I do when I play. I'm, expressing out of all that suffering that I went through younger, and it helped me. If I didn't have music, I don't think I would be the person I am today. It's like being a drug addict. I probably, if it saved me from being
And
whatever.
this is why we've got to keep talking about it, and this is why we've got to preserve it. And I think you can preserve it, and I think there's a way through, and I think things will get better after this internet down. I think things will get better. When I was 15, I had a breakdown, and I was very, very overwrought, very in a bad place. I read about John McLaughlin in the back of a guitar tuition book. I hadn't heard him, and I went looking for this album. The album was deleted, and my mom got me a copy of it, Birds of Fire. I put that album on, and when I heard John's playing on that, he embodied how I felt. He embodied how I felt, and he showed me the way out of it. And of course, I can remember listening to One Word and that build up of solos when they go around in a circle, and then the next track, which is called Sanctuary, and I remember thinking, yeah. This is it. And that's what this music was to me. That's what it was. I mean, the fact that Gary's played with my two absolute idols and Billy Cobham. I mean, God, it's ridiculous. But this is how much it means to me. This is how much it means. I mean, John McLaughlin, I'm not even going to talk to Gary about John, because I know it'll be 3 hours.
Another show.
Yeah, another show. I don't even want to go there.
Yeah, we'll do it. Well, we can do another one. But
yeah,
but I'm just so happy to be one to have played on that record, you know, to really bring forth predominantly a lot of the attitudes we're discussing, you know, and typically they were from a certain time, and that this album really evokes that, and I really think it does, and I kind of think it did. Intuitively or impulse on impulse really, but it was definitely influenced by, of course, what Dean said, because some producers will say obtuse things, you know, pretending to be Miles Davis or whatever, and I'll take absolutely no note of them, and they go, yeah, very good, great. So, you know, whatever, but if I think the clever ones, it's one thing to have a vision, I always find, and it's another thing to act on it. You know, are you brave enough? How much do you love to want to walk out and deliver something as powerful as that, and aspire to do that? And I think it's a testament to what your code is, how you feel about life. What's your reason? Life is short. We're not going to be here long. You know, why not do something?
But Gary,
it's like Andy said. It's Andy. It's like what you said on the review. And Dean said the same thing. He goes, no one's going to ever hear this album. He goes, so just go for it and do whatever the hell you want, you know, because who buys CDs and this kind of music, you know? And
people are gonna listen to it now. You lot at home, where are you?
Yeah.
You know, look at the quality entertainment that me, James, and Gary are bringing here. The link's down below. Go and buy it, or sling your hook. Yeah. Get off. You're not a proper music fan. That's how you sell it out.
Well,
off you go and buy it now.
Well,
I would say to anybody watching this, including fans of Andy, to really know what we're talking about here, I think it's evident in music. So go and listen to us all in time.
Yeah, I wanted to put a shout out. I want to put a shout out to, obviously, Eric Marienthal for playing on the title song of Soul in Time.
Yeah.
You know, he donated his time, you know, to it, and Hadrian, you know, I wanted to compensate them. They just wanted to be on the album. They just like, you know what, I just want to do it. And everyone played their heart out. And the percussionist actually played on Dean's last album that he did.
Yeah.
It's got a weird name. I can't think of it, but it's not even an English language word, I think. But he played on that album, and everybody just came together, and you know, it morphed in from a James Morgan solo album into something bigger. And the statement, like the stuff we're talking about, it really represents what we're talking about, like Gary says.
So you lot at home, right? If you want to go and hear it, there's a link down below, or I will put a link into the video where I'm listening in my car. And and it's a very difficult thing to do. Only as jazz musician can do this. I embody the music physically as I'm driving, which I thought was the best way of selling it. And I thought you know, am I an
I was
idiot or not?
convinced.
I thought,
I was
one of my
convinced.
heroes, Gary Husband's going to be watching me do this. I thought he's either going to think, "Oh, I love this," or he's going to think this bloke's an idiot. But whatever he thought, I'm so glad that you've both come here, and I'm so glad I've managed to get you on the channel, Gary. And there's a lot more I've got to talk about. And you know, it's like you're playing, you do connect. But I don't know how you do it. You also sound totally in control as well. I just,
You do need to do a
as a
show.
master musician. I know he. I can tell he doesn't like these. He doesn't like this, but I got to say it, Gary, because sometimes you got to send the love back. And you know, I've been listening to you for 40 years, and keyboards and drums, absolutely wonderful. And one more drummer while Gary's here. One more drummer, the other guy that's one of my big inspirations, Mark Mondesi. One of the greatest drummers that's ever lived, as far as I'm concerned. Another guy I saw over and over again. Do you know him, James? Mark Mondesi,
No.
one of the best drummers in the world, wouldn't you say, Gary?
It's spelled Mondesier.
Yeah, yeah.
They
And
call
what's the
themselves
first name?
Mondesi.
Because the thing is,
his
as soon as
brother
I get,
his
yeah,
brother
carry on.
works with us in Billy Cobham's band in Spectrum 50 right now, and his name's Mike
Yeah,
Mondesier.
Who's the drummer? Omar something?
No, Mark Mondesier.
Mark Mondesi.
So, but there's another. Oh, okay.
Did you ever hear any of the records by the Fourth Dimension, John's band, the early ones that we did?
Probably. I don't remember.
Like
But
To the One, and he also played on the Promise with Jeff Beck.
okay.
Yeah, yeah. You know the
Is there
Jeff
a
Beck
drummer?
duets.
Is there a drummer with the last name Hakeem?
Yeah, Omar Hakim.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, he's great. Yeah,
Omar's like, great. It's
no,
just
this guy's English.
I've got to say this because as soon as I get off, because again, he's another guy I've sent so much love out. So I've learnt this with the channel. And Mark, when being in the UK and trying to being a Billy Cobham fan, Tony Williams fan, the guys we had to go and try and see would be Gary or Mark because they were the guys doing it here. And I went to see Mark over and over again, and
Yeah,
he's hooked up now, and I'll chat, and I'll be saying I've just spoke to Gary. I know you know Mark very well, so he will be watching it. So hi, Mark. He'll be watching
he's
it.
playing for reasons. He always has done. He's
Uh,
he's always has his message. Always
oh,
has.
it's something else, and he's another guy that I mean, you know, Gary, I was always trying to play fast and all over the place and do the Dennis Chambers, Vinny and Gary and Mark. They were my guys, but I never got it as relaxed as you guys. And I've got to pick your brain, Gary, how you get it. I don't know whether it's in your hands or whether it's in your soul. I don't know what it is, but you're just, and it's on
It's
this
on my
album.
wish list.
Oh no, there's so much air in your playing, Gary, on this on the drums. I don't know
There's so
how
much
you
air in here too.
he can't take the compliments. There's too many compliments, but yeah, absolute brilliant album. You guys, we're talking about connecting to the great reservoir, the
Yes,
infinite source of energy. Right,
absolutely.
that's what we're talking about here, and
Yep.
these guys have done it on this album. That's what it's about. And if you're interested in that, and you got fed up with just some tiresome jazz fusac where someone's assembled it in Pro Tools and they've got their best Berkeley licks and they've got them just in the right place, if you're tired of that, and you know, then this is where you need to go. Come and check this album out. And Gary, you better come on again because I
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do a
we'll-
drum episode.
Can we do a drum one and I'll pick your brains because
Well, yeah, I'll pick yours too.
oh, I can't tell you anything.
We
I,
we all know everything somehow and nothing.
Yeah.
Do you not feel? I mean, we're trying. We know exactly what we want to do and why we want to do it, but there's no instruction manual and there's no safety net.
Mm-mm.
I don't know.
Okay.
Few key little, you know.
The only way to play with no net.
No net, man. And I
Yes.
love that story about Dean on this record coming to you and saying, you know, a big string noise or a big you got a string setting off, you know. And he said, "Oh no, leave that."
And speaking of
That's
air,
safe.
Andy, some of the songs I actually took my guitar out of during a couple of the bridges in Samba Sky and the 5/4 thing. I was playing like a heavy metal kind of guitar, picking muted picking, like a Al Di Meola type of thing there. And I took it out to give more air because what he was doing on the keyboards, it just sounded to me, in my ears, better. So I actually took out a lot of my stuff just to allow more space instead of just crammed full of, because a lot of the stuff I did was really just to relay what the song was to be for them to hear. I could do whatever I want after, but like Gary said,
now I'm getting older. Now I'm getting older. You know, when I was a kid, I played like it was like that. That's how I played, and it was great. And I can hear young players. Now I'm older. I can remember when I was quite young. There was an interview with Billy Cobham, and they said, "How do you play the drums?" And he said, "It's like a lovely meal." And he said, "You sit in front of a lovely table full of food, and you just take." And I thought, well, that's very nice. It sounds very arty-farty. And then as I got older, I realized what he was saying is that rather than pushing my will into the drums, you try and bring the sound out. And that's what I'm trying to develop at the moment. So I'm trying to, I'm trying to get it so I bring the sounds out. And then when I hear Gary play, it sounds like he's bringing the sound out of the drum. So it's coming back at him. This is a drummer's thing as well. I think it's a secret of drums. I've after 45 years playing, is that feeling of it coming back, and I think that's a very important thing, and that's what I want to talk to Gary about. But I'm sure it's a mystery to us all, isn't it? It's a mystery, But when I
heard your drumming, man, you're good.
Yeah, I know.
I try my best. I've only been doing it for 45 years.
I enjoy it.
I've always had a love-hate relationship with jazz because I love jazz, but here in the UK, all the players I met was sort of that, I call it like the cricket club jazz set, and you do Stella by Starlight, and I was there with my double kick pedals and all that bit, and they didn't want to know. So it's like I went off to prog rock.
I know. It was ever since the late 70s when I first came down to London, and I used to go and see who would have been playing in Ronnie's. There'd be McCoy Tyner group or somebody with somebody really on fire, Sonship or somebody like that, or it wasn't Eric Gravatt, unfortunately.
Or Alphonse Mouzon did some ridiculous stuff with.
No, this was sort of a later time, but it was still like on fire. And I remember a lot of other musicians being there and stuff, and they'd all be going, "Wow, man, it's just insane! The energy is insane. The whole thing's on fire, and that drummer is fantastic and stuff." And then within like a few days, I'd find myself playing a gig with one or a couple of those guys, and I'd be kind of going for it. No, keep it down, please. It doesn't need to be so intense. Just. And I thought, yeah, it's all okay, while we're there and we're watching these real guys do it. But
real guys, you hit the nail on the head. Yeah, real guys.
If we want to take on that spirit, no, it's not allowed. I mean, I even had brushes.
Yeah. I did up in Birmingham. Up in Birmingham in the 1980s, there was a thing called the Cannonball Jam in this pub, the Cannonball, and you'd go up and because I was I was low on the pecking order. Can I play one track? And so you get up and play. And I remember I would play, and I wasn't doing like Billy Cobham. I was trying to do my best Elvin, Tony Williams, more Elvin, I think rubbish version, but that's what I'm trying to do, Jack and John Hurt. And this guy came up to me and said, "Look, I'm trying to play the changes. Could you just keep time?" And I was just like, I can't be arsed with this. And when I did a clinic tour with Simon Phillips, and we talked about this, and Simon said, "Yeah," he goes, "That's the UK jazz scene." And he started telling me stories of trying to get gigs and people shutting the door because they'd found out he'd played with Mick Jagger, and they said, "Oh well, we can't have him,"
Hopelessly conservative. I mean, it was okay for the Americans to do it. If you want to say that, sorry, James, it was okay. For some reason, everything was forgiven if it was a major sort of American act that would come. And it's like, it would be balls to the wall, and people are going, "Yeah, man, that's where it's at," And the moment as I said before, we try to reflect some of that. It was like, oh no, save it for your own thing, or what, or whatever.
And this
But
is the thing. This is the thing with Allan Holdsworth. This is now he's dead. Everyone's going, "Oh my God, great guitarist!" Blah 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 blah. But when he was alive, nobody had the
we couldn't
open
get
mind.
arrested.
Yeah, they didn't understand what this guy had done. The last 40 years. I mean, there's saxophone players that play like Alan now. It's changed the whole jazz thing. We all could hear it. But at the time, yeah, nobody wanted to know because it didn't fall into like hard bop. It wasn't that ECM tasteful thing. It wasn't like, the sort of black awareness thing, all these little genres that there are. Alan didn't fit into it because he spent a life not fitting into it.
One of the first gigs I did with him, as IOU, or as the band, we weren't quite called that back then. We played in a place called the Rock Garden, which hosted a lot of good sort of prominent, from punk to sort of power, sort of rock bands at the time. And Alan managed to get a gig there, and it was at the point, I can't remember whether we had singer Paul Williams or not. I can't remember, but we'd gone in, and it was quite sort of, the sound check time was quite close to the thing, so we had to sort of get through his sound check, and we probably had 5 minutes to change the shirt and then go and play the show. Only we didn't leave stage, and we saw the thing, and we saw the time that we were supposed to play, and we noticed it was 8:30 or whatever it was, and so we I said, "Hi everybody," and we went into the first number. And the club owner or the proprietor of the venue or promoter or whoever it was came running down the central aisle, I remember, of this club, like with a look of panic on his face. Stop. And we're in the middle of the first number. Like by this time, getting really kind of working up a bit, he goes, stop. Alan's hand falls from the neck, and he's like, what? The guy, stop. Do you not know that people are in? And I was saving this for the book, but can you imagine that really happened? This guy thought we were just clowning around or just flailing away, just having a bit of a froth up with no plan or whatever. To the extent he actually believed that and came up and stopped the show.
Wow.
I mean,
wow.
Yeah, that's what we
Make
said.
sure you say his name in the book.
Yeah, I have some stories.
I cannot wait for this book, Gary. I cannot wait.
I better get on with it.
Because it seems like there's a bottomless pit of Allan Holdsworth stories. I think,
there are.
I mean, such a character.
Oh, amazing. Amazing.
I feel myself very lucky that I managed to have like a 4-minute conversation with him at that gig. A lovely guy, but he did seem so. We were all
great
baffled.
sense of humor.
Oh yeah.
Very funny.
Yeah,
and very gracious. It was funny when I was on stage opening for him. I wanted to move his pedals out of the way. He had those big metal pedals, and he put him up high eventually where he could do them up on a pedestal.
That's
right. And I asked him, I said, "Is it all right if I move your pedals back?" And he's like, "Yeah, just don't move them into your car." It was like always funny,
But definitely demons. Is that the case, Garrett? Definitely a lot of demons there.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
And I think I've always felt, compared to my other hero with John McLaughlin, I feel that there were demons there too, but John's managed somehow. And I feel it in the music. I might be completely. So a lot of what I go on. I listen to the music. I make decisions, listen to the music. But John seems to have achieved something quite unique musically. But again, it's another video. It's a bottomless pit of stuff. Yeah.
No, but I think
the thing I've liked about John McLaughlin is he's always reinvented himself. A lot of these players, they'll go on tour. They'll dress like they did in the 70s. you know, and I won't say who they are, but they go out and they play the songs they did in the 70s. The thing I like about John is he's always reinvented himself, gone forward. Indian music. One of the things when I talked to Dean, I said that I love about Gary's playing is that I know he has that Indian influence, and this music and this album needed that that other dimension to come in. It wasn't a groove orient. It's not a groove oriented music by any means, and I needed someone who can play different time signatures, but do it in a way like Indian music. It always has a groove, even though it's in these apps, time signatures. And Gary has brought that to this album. He really brought that dimension, that Indian flavor, I feel, in his
well,
playing. I can hear it.
I'm happy you felt so, man. Yeah.
Well, I've always called that additive time. So you play from the inside out. I got that from Billy Cobham.
Yeah.
Rather than seeing it as this, you see it as this,
Yeah.
this, and this, and like you talk about crosswinds. I don't think I would be able to play as well as I can if I hadn't heard Flash Flood by Billy Cobham, because it stumped me for about a year, like a 12, 13 years old, not having a clue what the hell was going on, but knowing something was going on, and just trying to understand that one track is basically laid the foundations for me to be able to play it reasonably, I suppose. So this is what you get from these players, isn't it? It's like the gifts of Billy's timekeeping in the Mahavishnu Orchestra is just revolutionary, isn't it? And it's the way he plays time.
And that was my first album too, Birds of Fire. And I remember the warfare between those two on Miles, what was it? Miles Ahead? No, what's it?
Miles Beyond.
Miles Beyond.
Beyond.
I've got it down in my head.
And he's like John's the protagonist there. And
Yeah.
but like in a split second, Billy's all over him.
Yeah. And the thing is, a few seconds before, they're like, boom, boom.
I know.
The most coolest. Well, here we are. It's a lovely day. We're just grooving, and then before you know it, they could turn on like a, couldn't they? That band.
And Billy splitting the triplets between fours and fives, groups of fours and fives. I mean, real Indian style. I asked him about that sometimes, and he said, "Well, I guess it was in time." It's not always that like they know, what it was specifically, but they certainly knew what they were going for. And I think that was, I mean, that it was always the call of that music that got me.
And that's what they don't realize with these Instagram players. And this is another thing, is that Billy Cobham's playing on the scene. He's playing with Horace Silver. He gets a gig with Miles, and then John McLaughlin calls him, and he brings these charts in. And I know that one of the players that had joined the Mahavishnu, he went, I don't get this. So he went to see John Abercrombie, and he showed him the charts, and John Abercrombie says, I haven't got a clue what this is. And so it's not the chops, it's their negotiation within that band. And then when Narada comes in at 19 years old in 1974, he's 19 years old. The world's only been playing like that for about 2 or 3 years. And then Narada comes steaming in on that track on, Apocalypse, where he comes in with that solo. He comes in like that. But you did the same thing, Gary. I'm talking to you. You did it with Allan.
Because those people gave us license, I mean, that's the way I sort of break it down, really. Both from the strongest way in the music, through the music, but also the words would do it to me too. I mean, Tony Williams saying things like, I had a lot of pressure on me, and this is such and such a group when I was really young to play the hi-hat on the 2 and the 4, or the bass drum sort of reverting to the 1 each time. I said, I didn't want to play the bass drum there. I wanted to play the bass drum where it meant something. And I remember they drew the words in it, they printed the words in italics. So he obviously emphasized it, like he really particularly meant that. He wanted to play the bass drum where it meant something. And just what that the spoken word, well, the written word, quoting him, did for me was it gave me a sort of, well, wow, if somebody can go that far out on a limb and just believe that he's right and that his conviction is it's good to get behind these impulses that we're having and deliver it with a lot of determination and meaning and conviction, then I can do it too.
Conviction. Tony
That
joined that. He joined that band with Miles, right? He's like
Self-belief.
17, 18 years old, right?
yeah.
And he's playing so fast you can't get your head around how fast that right hand is. And Miles turns around and he goes, Tony, you're playing too fast. And then Tony turns around and he went, no, you need to practice.
Yeah, he needed practice. Yeah.
And Tony goes, and Miles goes, okay, fair enough. And he did.
Fair call.
Because Tony, as much as Miles was mentoring Tony, when Tony, I can see this, it's astonishing. He's leading that band, isn't he? It's like
Oh,
Miles,
yeah.
he's leading Miles through.
He's navigating
Incredible.
the whole thing. Yeah, it's like the world according to Tony. Oh, yeah.
How do you get like that? And this is the stuff I want to get the focus on. And what's lovely, because I think we've definitely gone on for long enough now. I think
Yeah.
is for that spirit to travel through, and then James, for you then to be able to access that through Dean and through Gary and through Hadrian, but especially Gary and Dean. These guys have been there doing that, and I can feel it on the album. So I'm so happy to be able to give you a bit of a push with this. Hopefully my lot will go out and listen to it and all that type of stuff. And go and check it out, everybody, and get involved. Start putting some comments up. Go and have a listen. Tell these guys what you think of it, because this is what us musicians love. We put it out there, and all we want to do is
buy
have
the CD.
Yeah, buy the CD. Go and download it. Tell your friends about it. Spread the word. And hopefully, if you guys could make it a big success, and I can have these two back on my channel, because I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you very much for coming on. Thank you so much. It's been
I would love that.
fascinating.